Dr. Karvoth stood before the Galactic Council chamber, his forearms gesturing dramatically at the holographic display. He was about to propose the study that would define his career, or end it. Hard to say which at this point. Esteemed council members, he began, his voice dripping with academic superiority. I present to you the galaxy's greatest mystery. Humans. A collective groan echoed through the chamber. Everyone was tired of hearing about humans. No. Hear me out, Karvoth continued, undeterred. We've observed adult humans. Dangerous, yes. Unpredictable, certainly. But how do they become this way? I propose we study the source. Human children, his assistant, Yilnex, a nervous, six-legged creature who resembled an oversized beetle with anxiety issues, whispered urgently. Sir, are you sure about this? The safety reports are written by cowards, Karvoth dismissed with a wave of his upper left arm. These are children, small, developing beings. How dangerous could they possibly be? In the back of the room, Bromter, the security chief who'd been hired for the project, cracked his knuckles. 12 of them. He was a Krothian warrior, 7 feet tall, with scales like armor plating and a resume that included suppressing 3 rebellions. I've handled insurgents, pirates, and a rogue AI collective. I think I can manage a few human larvae. The only dissenting voice came from Pip, the junior researcher, a small floating jellyfish-like being who'd actually done the reading. Excuse me, Dr. But the human development files specifically warn against junior researchers. Should be seen taking notes, not heard. Miking objections. Karvoth snapped. The council has already approved our funding. The research station on Colony Terra 7 is complete. We open in 2 weeks. Pip deflated, literally, shrinking down several inches in the way their species did when stressed. The facility they'd built was state-of-the-art. Absolutely escape-proof. Bromter had assured them. Every corner monitored. Every system child-proofed according to the regulations for the 17 other species offspring they'd studied. The schedule was meticulously planned. Educational activities, recreational periods, mealtimes, and observation windows. We'll advertise it as a cultural exchange summer program, Yilnex suggested, reviewing the logistics on his datapad. Free enrichment activities for human children ages 5 to 12. The colony's parents will love it. Brilliant, Karvoth agreed. We'll gather data on their social structures, learning patterns, and developmental behaviors. By the end of the 6-week program, we understand exactly how humans go from adorable offspring to the terrifying adults that have conquered half the galaxy's troublesome regions. Should we start with a small group? Pip ventured nervously. Maybe 5 or 6 children. Nonsense. We need a proper sample size. 30 children should suffice. Bromter nodded confidently. My security team can handle 30 small humans. We've installed biometric locks, reinforced the ventilation grates, and established a clear chain of command. Standard containment protocols. They're not prisoners. Bromter. Yilnex sighed. They're research subjects. Same thing, just different paperwork. The facility opened on a bright Tuesday morning on Colony Terra 7, a peaceful human settlement known for its excellent schools and family-friendly atmosphere. The aliens had chosen it specifically because it seemed safe, boring, and predictable. 30 human children, carefully selected from volunteer families, arrived with backpacks and excitement. Karvoth watched them file in through the main entrance, noting their small stature, their high-pitched voices, their apparent fragility. Look at them, he mused to his team. So innocent, so manageable. This will be the easiest study of my career. Yilnex checked his incident report forms. He'd brought 50, thinking he was over-preparing. He was going to need more forms. Many more forms. Behind them, one of the children, a freckled girl named Zara, surveyed the facility with the calculating eye of a general assessing a battlefield. She smiled. It was not a comforting smile. Hour 1 proceeded according to plan, which should have been the first warning sign. The children sat in a semicircle, while Karvoth introduced himself and his team. They seemed attentive, curious, and well-behaved. "Welcome, young humans," Karvoth said warmly. "We're so excited to learn about your culture and share ours with you. Today, we'll start with some simple activities to help everyone get comfortable." A small boy with glasses raised his hand. "Why do you have 4 arms?" "Excellent question. My species evolved on a planet with can you juggle?" "Well, technically yes, but that's not really relevant to do it." Within minutes, Karvoth found himself juggling datapads while 30 children chanted faster, faster, faster. This was not how xenobiological research was supposed to go, but he reminded himself that building rapport was important. Then came snack time. Yilnex had prepared a selection of human-appropriate foods based on nutritional databases. Fruit slices, crackers, juice boxers. Simple, safe. "I don't like grapes," announced a child named Marcus. "That's fine. You can have crackers instead," Yilnex replied pleasantly. Tommy took all the crackers. "Tommy, please share the crackers." "I'm establishing a market economy," Tommy explained seriously. He was 8. "Crackers are the premium commodity. Marcus can trade me his grapes at a rate of 3 grapes per cracker." "That's not how snack time works, actually," interrupted a girl named Sophie. "Grapes are clearly more nutritious and desirable. 2 grapes per cracker, maximum." Within 10 minutes, a full-scale economic system had emerged, complete with trade disputes, a pricing committee, and someone named Jake who'd appointed himself as the snack commissioner. Yilnex stood there, holding his datapad, wondering how he'd lost control so quickly. Meanwhile, Bromter was learning that security protocols meant nothing to people who didn't respect your authority. He'd established clear boundaries. Stay in designated areas. No running, no touching equipment. The children immediately began testing every boundary with scientific precision. "This door says authorized personnel only," a girl observed. "That's right. So you shouldn't. But what makes someone authorized? Having clearance, which you don't. How do you get clearance? You need proper training. And can we get training? No, you're children. That seems discriminatory." Bromter was a warrior. He'd stared down armed combatants without flinching. He was not equipped for a 9-year-old girl using logical reasoning like a precision weapon. The real trouble started when the children discovered they could access the ventilation system. Not because it was poorly designed, but because human children, apparently, had the skeletal flexibility of invertebrates and the problem-solving skills of engineers. "How did you get in the air ducts?" Bromter demanded, staring at 3 children who'd somehow appeared in the observation deck. "We walked," one replied innocently. "The grates are sealed." They were. "Those seals require a molecular decoupler to remove." "Oh, is that what that thing was?" "We found it in the supply closet." Pip was frantically taking notes, their translucent body pulsing with Dr. Karvoth. "I really think we should reassess our security measures. In the last hour alone, we've had 6 protocol violations. An unauthorized economic system, and someone named Zara has figured out how to bypass 3 biometric locks." "Growing pains," Karvoth insisted, though his confident smile was getting harder to maintain. "They're just curious. It's actually fascinating how quickly they adapt to new environments, sir. One of them asked me why our species hasn't developed thumbs, then gave me a lecture on evolutionary advantages. She's 6. Precocious. She made me question my entire existence." By the end of day 1, Yilnex had filled out 17 incident reports. Not because anything dangerous had happened, but because the children had found 17 ways to do things that shouldn't have been possible. As the kids were picked up by their parents, they seemed energized, excited, already planning for tomorrow. The research team collapsed in the break room. "So," Bromter said quietly, "tomorrow we establish stricter protocols." "Yes, definitely," Karvoth agreed. Outside, they could hear the children's voices fading into the evening. One carried on the wind. "Tomorrow, I'm bringing tools." Nobody slept well that night. Day 3 began with what Karvoth called structured recreational activities. This was a fancy way of saying, please, for the love of all that's holy, let us maintain some control. What? The schedule was ambitious. Organized games, arts and crafts, educational presentations, all carefully designed to keep the children engaged and, more importantly, contained. Today we'll play a traditional Krothian game called Capture the Beacon, Prompter announced. 2 teams, simple rules, excellent for teaching cooperation and strategy. He explained the rules carefully. Stay in the designated play area. Use the provided flags to mark territories. First team to capture the beacon wins. Any questions? Zara raised her hand. Are there rules against psychological warfare? No, that's not. This is a children's game. So that's a no. Then, excellent. 20 minutes later, Prompter was trying to figure out how the game had devolved into something resembling a special operations mission. The children had divided into 4 teams instead of 2, established a demilitarized zone, and were currently engaged in what appeared to be diplomatic negotiations over beacon access rights. One team, led by Marcus, had fortified their position using recreation equipment in ways the manufacturers definitely hadn't intended. Another team, under Sophie's command, had created a diversion using synchronized dance moves, while a strike team infiltrated through, you guessed it, the ventilation system. This is actually remarkable, Pip observed, recording everything. They've independently developed tactical cooperation, resource management, and strategic planning, all in less than half an hour. They've turned a simple game into a military operation, Prompter muttered. Yes, remarkable. The beacon was eventually captured by Tommy, who deconvinced all the teams that the real prize was the friends they made along the way. And while everyone was having an emotional moment, he just walked over and took it. I believe that's called a confidence scheme, Yilnex noted. He's 9, Karvoth said weakly. Arts and crafts went worse. The aliens had provided safe, non-toxic materials, paper, child-safe, scissors, glue sticks, markers, standard creative supplies that had worked perfectly fine with 70 other species children. Human children, apparently, saw these not as art supplies, but as raw materials. Within the first 15 minutes, someone had weaponized a glue stick. Not intentionally dangerously, but enough to create sticky barriers that trapped Yilnex in the supply corner for 20 minutes. The child-safe scissors, which couldn't cut skin, turned out to be excellent for disassembling electronic equipment. Why is Marcus taking apart his datapad? Karvoth asked. He says he's making it better, Pip translated. It's a top-of-line Galactic standard issue pad. He doesn't need improving. He's added 3 functions it didn't have before. That's impossible. He's 9, sir, not stupid. The paint incident would go down in facility history. A simple watercolor activity resulted in what Yilnex's incident report would later describe as an abstract expressionist crime scene covering approximately 40% of the eastern wing. How did children make paint travel that far? Nobody knew. The physics shouldn't have worked. But the real masterstroke came when the aliens discovered the children had figured out they all looked roughly similar to alien eyes. By swapping shirts, they'd created an identification nightmare. Zara, please return to your assigned seat, Karvoth instructed. I'm not Zara. I'm Sophie. Your name tag says Zara. Sophie and I traded up. She wanted to sit by the window. That's not allowed. Which rule does it violate? Karvoth pulled up the rule list. There wasn't actually a rule against trading seats, or name tags, or, apparently, identities. By afternoon, the researchers had stopped using names and started using designation codes. Red shirt 1, blue shirt 3. The quiet one, who's definitely planning something. That last one was a kid named Alex who at UNT caused a single problem but radiated an energy that made everyone nervous. Tommy's trade economy had evolved into something that would make financial regulators weep. He'd introduce futures trading for tomorrow's snacks. Zara had started a protection service where, for a small fee in crackers, she'd make sure your art project didn't mysteriously get accidentally damaged. That's a protection racket, Bromter observed. She's 10. Yes, and she's running a protection racket. By day 3's end, Yilnex had filled out 42 incident reports. Not one involved actual danger or harm. Every single one involved things that theoretically shouldn't have been possible but absolutely were. Karvoth sat in his office, reviewing footage of the day. On screen, the children were leaving, laughing, high-fiving, clearly having the time of their lives. His scientific pride warred with his survival instinct. Pride was losing. Perhaps, he said slowly to his team, we should consider that human children operate on different parameters than we initially calculated. They're terrifying, Bromter stated flatly. They're efficient problem solvers, Pip corrected. Same thing. Outside, parents picked up their kids, asking the standard questions. Did you have fun? Where did you good? What did you learn? Inside, the research team was learning something too. They'd made a terrible mistake. And they still had 5.5 weeks to go. Day 12 started like any other disaster waiting to happen. Except this time the disaster had been patiently waiting, observing, and planning. The children had been model participants all morning. Too model. Too quiet. Too cooperative. I don't like this, Bromter muttered, watching the security feeds. They're plotting something. They're doing exactly what we asked, Yilnex countered. Art projects at the art tables. Reading in the reading corner. Everything by the rules. That's what worries me. He was right to worry. At precisely 1400 hours, Marcus asked the question that would later be cited in 17 different incident reports, 3 formal inquiries, and 1 psychological evaluation for the staff. Hey, Dr. Karvoth, what does this button do? Now, in fairness to Marcus, the button was in the research laboratory, which the children absolutely were not supposed to have access to. It was behind 3 locked doors, each requiring biometric clearance that only the senior staff possessed. The fact that 12 human children were currently in the laboratory was itself a problem that would need addressing later. Marcus, step away from the console, Karvoth said, trying to keep his voice calm while internally screaming. That controls the anti-gravity chamber. Cool. But what does this button do? The one you're pointing at controls the molecular scanner. Marcus, seriously, do not. E prest Italiano. Look, in Marcus's defense, he was 12 years old, and buttons exist to be pressed. It's basically a law of nature. If anything, the real question is why advanced alien civilizations kept putting important buttons where curious humans could reach them. The molecular scanner activated with a sound like reality hiccuping. It was designed to create detailed atomic-level scans of objects for analysis. It was not designed to scan the peanut butter sandwich that someone, probably Tommy, had left on the console. The machine tried its best. It really did. But molecular scanners are very literal devices. When they scan something, they create a perfect digital model. And when that model accidentally feeds into the matter printer that nobody realized was connected, let's just say that within 30 seconds, there were now 17 identical peanut butter sandwiches, and the machine showed no signs of stopping. "Turn it off!" Karvoth shouted. "Which button?" Marcus asked, staring at a console with approximately 40 buttons. All unlabeled because the scientists hadn't expected anyone unauthorized to ever see it. Not that one. The anti-gravity chamber activated. Now there were approximately 30 peanut butter sandwiches floating through the laboratory along with several chairs, 3 data pads, and 1 very surprised Yilnex, who'd made the mistake of standing too close to the field generator. "This is amazing," Sophie Jayet, jumping to grab a floating sandwich. "This is a disaster, Karvoth." Corrected. Why can't it be both? That's when the biology lab containment breached. In their defense, the researchers had been studying local Terrasavan wildlife, specifically a small rabbit-like creature called a puffball that was notable for being extremely fluffy, completely harmless, and able to reproduce at alarming rates when stressed. The puffballs, stressed by the sudden anti-gravity and the general chaos, did what puffballs do. Within 2 minutes, there were approximately 75 puffballs bouncing around in zero gravity. which sounds adorable until you realize that each one was shedding fur at an exponential rate, creating a floating cloud of fluff that was making it impossible to see anything. The facility's AI, detecting multiple simultaneous system failures, did what it was programmed to do, sent an automated distress signal to colonial authority and locked down all exits to contain the situation, which meant the children couldn't leave, which meant they had to fix it. "Okay, everyone calm down," Zara shouted over the chaos. "We need a plan. We need an adult." One of the younger kids yelled, "The adults are useless right now." "Look at them." She had a point. Karvoth was frozen in horror. Bromter was trying to catch puffballs and failing spectacularly. Yulnex was slowly rotating in midair, trying not to panic. Pip was the only one taking notes, which was helpful for documentation but not for solving the immediate problem. "Alex, you're good with computers. Can you shut down the molecular scanner?" Zara directed. "Probably, but I need someone to hold me stable in the anti-gravity field. Marcus, you caused this. You help him." "On it." "Sophie, organize a team to round up the puffballs. Use the nets from the recreation equipment." "What nets?" "The ones we're going to make from the volleyball net and some cable ties." "Tommy, you handle that." "Why am I on manufacturing?" "Because you're the only one who figured out how the 3D printer works." Tommy couldn't argue with that logic. For the next 20 minutes, the laboratory was a scene of controlled chaos, as 30 human children did what they did best, turned a crisis into a problem-solving exercise. Alex managed to shut down both the scanner and the anti-gravity, which resulted in everything falling at once in a cascade that somehow didn't hurt anyone. The children had instinctively positioned themselves to catch the smaller kids and cushion the landing. The puffballs were corralled, counted, and returned to their habitat. The sandwiches were collected and, because they were still perfectly good sandwiches, distributed for snack time. The facility was still a disaster, but it was a controlled disaster. That's when the parents started arriving. The distress signal had automatically notified emergency contacts. 30 very concerned human parents descended on the facility expecting the worst. What they found were their children, slightly disheveled but unharmed, explaining excitedly about anti-gravity and molecular scanners and emergency protocols. And they found 4 alien researchers who looked like they'd aged several years in one afternoon. "So," said one parent, a woman named Patricia, looking around at the chaos. "Normal Tuesday, then." Karvoth stared at her. "Normal?" "This was a catastrophic system failure requiring emergency intervention." "Right, but nobody's hurt. Nothing's actually damaged beyond repair, and the kids handled it. So, normal. They're children. They shouldn't have had to handle a crisis situation." Patricia laughed, not unkindly, but with the wary knowledge of someone who'd raised human children. "Doctor, let me tell you about the time my Marcus decided to rewire the house because he thought he could make it more energy efficient. He was 7. That's terrifying. That's Thursday." The Colonial Authority arrived an hour later, led by Governor Rodriguez, a woman who'd descended enough in her 30 years of colonial administration that very little surprised her anymore. This surprised her. "Let me get this straight," she said, surveying the laboratory while Karvoth and his team stood like students called to the principal's office. "You invited 30 human children into a research facility with access to experimental equipment, and you're surprised something went wrong. The equipment was secured." Karvoth protested weakly, clearly not well enough. "The biometric locks. Dr. My 8-year-old daughter figured out how to bypass my biometric locks on my personal files when she was 6. She wanted to know what I was getting her for her birthday." Rodriguez sighed. "Did any of you actually research human child development before starting this program?" Pip raised a tentacle-like appendage, nervously. "I tried to, Governor." The warning labels were quite extensive. And I was told that warning labels were written by cowards. Rodriguez turned to Karvoth. "You said that, didn't you?" "I may have used those exact words. Yes." "Right. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. I am going to sit you all down and explain some things about human children that apparently didn't make it into your research notes." She pulled up a chair. The research team sat obediently. The children, finishing their snacks in the next room, were providing a running commentary on the day's events that the team could hear through the walls. Human children, Rodriguez began, are not small, innocent versions of adults. They're chaos, agents in training. Everything about their development is designed to prepare them for a universe that is fundamentally unpredictable and often hostile. But they're so small, Yilnex protested. So are most explosives. That shut him up. From approximately age to 218, humans are basically testing every single parameter of reality. Can I reach that? What happens if I mix these things? How far can I push this boundary? It's not malicious. It's developmental. They're learning cause and effect at a species-wide level. Karvoth was taking notes now. This was the data he'd wanted, just not how he'd expected to get it. The reason humans are good at crisis management, Rodriguez continued, is because we've been managing tiny crises our entire lives. You think adults improvise well? We learned that skill by spending 18 years dealing with children who can turn any situation into a learning opportunity, usually in the most chaotic way possible. But the protocols Bromter started mean nothing to someone who doesn't understand why the protocol exists. Human children question everything. It's not disrespect. It's how we learn. You tell a human child not to touch something. Their immediate question is why. If you can't give them a good reason, they're going to test it. That's terrifying, Brommer stated. That's why humans are the way we are. Rodriguez smiled. You wanted to understand how we function as adults. This is Italiano. We survive because we're raised by tiny anarchists who teach us that rules are guidelines. Problems are puzzles, and every crisis is just an interesting challenge. Pip was furiously recording all of this. So, the behavior we've observed, the problem solving, the boundary testing, the creative rule interpretation, is completely normal. Expected. Even, we've been documenting it as concerning incidents. I'd be more concerned if they weren't doing those things. It would mean something was wrong with their development. The weight of this settled over the research team. They'd been studying what they thought was aberrant behavior when it was actually just standard human development. My question, Rodriguez said, standing up, is what are you going to do with this information? Karvoth looked at his team, then at the children, visible through the window, laughing and reconstructing the day's events with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for epic adventures. I'm going to write the most important paper of my career, he sighed slowly, but fierce. I'm going to finish this program, properly, with actual understanding this time. Good answer. Rodriguez headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Doctor, the kids have been live streaming parts of their experience to their friends. Your research facility is already famous across the colony. Just thought you should know. After she left, Karvoth pulled up the local network. There were 17 different video compilations of aliens react to human kids. They'd gone viral. The most popular one was titled, Watch Scientists Slowly Realize They Made a Huge Mistake. It had 3 million views. Well, Pip said philosophically, at least we're getting public engagement with our research. I'm never going to live this down, Karvoth muttered. No, Yilnex agreed. No, you're really not. From the other room, they could hear Zara explaining her strategic planning to a younger child. See, the trick is to always have a backup plan. And a backup for your backup. That's what humans do. Karvoth smiled despite himself. Maybe that was the real finding. Humans didn't just survive the galaxy. They thrived in it because they planned for chaos. They were raised by it. 3 weeks later, Dr. Karvoth stood before the Galactic Council again. Same chamber. Different presentation. Completely different energy. Esteemed council members, he began. And this time there was no pretension in his voice. Just weary wisdom. I present my findings on human child development. The presentation title appeared on the holographic display. Preliminary observations on the survival training mechanisms. Disguised as human child rearing, how chaos agents create crisis specialists. A council member from Regional 7 leaned forward. Dr. Karvoth, We've seen the footage circulating on the galactic networks. Is it true that human children breached your laboratory's security? Yes, in less than 2 weeks. 12 days, actually. And the incident with the molecular scanner resolved by the children themselves, with minimal adult intervention. Karvoth advanced his presentation, which brings me to my primary finding. Humans are not successful despite their chaotic child-rearing practices. They're successful because of them. He showed footage from the facility. Kids, problem-solving. Kids, negotiating. Kids turning every obstacle into a challenge. Human children are essentially stress-testing every system they encounter. They're not trying to cause problems. They're learning the parameters of reality through direct experimentation. This creates adults who see every problem as solvable, every crisis as manageable, and every rule is potentially negotiable given the right circumstances. Another council member spoke up. So, you're saying human military effectiveness, their diplomatic unpredictability, their technological innovation, all stems from spending their formative years being raised by tiny chaos agents who teach them that nothing is impossible, just difficult. Karvoth smiled. Human parents don't raise their children in safe, controlled environments. They raise them in controlled chaos, teaching crisis management from age 2. The presentation continued with data, observations, and the kind of scientific rigor that academic papers required. But everyone knew the real story was the footage that had gone viral across 17 star systems. The paper was published in the Galactic Journal of Xenobiology. It was meant to be serious academic work. It became the galaxy's most downloaded comedy piece within a week. Sample excerpts included Subject Marcus, age 12, disassembled and improved a datapad using art supplies, leading us to question the efficacy of our technology. And Subject Zara, age 10, established what can only be described as a protection racket within 48 hours, demonstrating advanced understanding of power dynamics and resource management. The abstract alone became a meme. We went in expecting to study children. We were studied instead. Clips from the facility's security footage became entertainment across the galaxy. The most popular was a compilation of Brompter's increasingly desperate attempts to establish authority, set to dramatic music. It was titled, When a Warrior Meets His Match. A 7-foot soldier versus 30 small humans. Brompter himself had retired from active security work. He now consulted for high-security installations, with one specific specialty, advising against any operation that involved humans under ADI. His consulting rates were astronomical. He was worth every credit. Never again, he'd told his first client. I've faced down armed insurgents without fear. But a child who asks why with genuine curiosity, that's a weapon you can't defend against. Yilnex had written his memoir, 30 Days in Hell, a survivor's account. It was marketed as comedy, but filed under nonfiction. The book tour took him across 3 sectors. At every stop, parents of various species would approach him with stories of their own children's exploits. Human parents would just pat his shoulder sympathetically. They knew. They'd always known. The Galactic Council, after reviewing Karvoth's findings, quietly archived several military contingency plans for operations in human space. Someone on the strategic committee had run the math. If human children could breach their research facility in 12 days, what could human adults do to military installations? Nobody wanted to find out. Pip had actually come out ahead. They'd befriended several of the children's families and visited Terra 7 regularly. From a safe distance, at carefully scheduled times. With warning, the kids loved them and promised to be good. Pip knew better than to trust those promises, but appreciated the sentiment. Karvoth got tenure based on his paper's impact. Citations were through the roof, even if most of them were in entertainment blogs rather than scientific journals. His reputation transformed from promising researcher to the scientists who survived studying human children. He never worked with human children again, but he did give lectures. His most popular was titled Why Humans Are the Way They Are, a cautionary tale. The final slide was always the same. Footage from the last day of the program. When the 30 children had presented their families with a detailed report on what we learned about aliens, it included assessments of each researcher's weaknesses, suggestions for improving facility security, and a business proposal for a kid-run consulting service helping other species understand humans. Tommy had already incorporated. 6 months after the program ended, Karvoth received a message. It was from the children, now a bit older, asking if he'd be interested in collaborating on a follow-up study. Their proposed topic: comparative analysis of alien species, problem-solving capabilities, a human youth perspective. Karvoth stared at the message for a long time. Then he forwarded it to Bromter with a single question. Should I be worried? Bromter's response came back immediately. Absolutely. They're planning something. What should I do? Pray they like you. Human children respect competence and honesty. You showed both. You might survive. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. The final scene of our story takes place in a small cafe on the 30 children from the original program, now teenagers, sit around a table, planning their next project. So we've established baseline data on Krothian crisis response, Zara says, checking her notes. And we've got preliminary observations on Rigelian adaptability. The Centauri delegation is interested in a cultural exchange, Sophie adds. They think studying human education methods could benefit their colonies. They have no idea what they're in for. Marcus grins. Should we warn them? Asks one of the younger members. Tommy leans back in his chair. Where's the learning opportunity in that? The group laughs. It's not a malicious laugh. It's the laugh of people who genuinely believe that chaos is just another word for teaching moment. On Terra 7, Governor Rodriguez receives a notification. Another species has requested to establish a research facility studying humans. She approves it with a smile. Let them learn. In his office on the Galactic Council station, Karvoth gets the same notification. He immediately sends a message to the researchers. Read the warning labels. They're not written by cowards. They're written by survivors. And somewhere, Bromter adds another bullet point to his consulting presentation. Rule 1. Respect the small humans. Rule 2. No, seriously, respect them. Rule 3. If you ignore rules 1 and 2, don't call me. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were the way they were for a reason. And that reason was currently 14 years old, had a detailed plan, and absolutely no fear of locked doors. The final words in Karvoth's paper, buried in the conclusion after all the data and analysis, summarized everything. If you want to understand humans, understand this. They are raised by chaos agents who teach them that every problem is solvable, every boundary is testable, and every crisis is just an adventure waiting to happen. Approach with caution. Approach with respect. And for the sake of your sanity, never, ever underestimate them. Below that, in smaller text, one last addition. Especially the quiet ones. They're planning something.